everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about something completely different. Of course, I've got tons of CDs to talk about in the future, like the brand new 3-CD Dionne Warwick, the complete Scepter singles out on Real Gone Music. But that's not what I'm going to talk about right now. What I'm going to talk about right now is my secret career as a music journalist. That is true. I have been a music journalist for 40 years, but I don't really count the first 10, 15 years because of the fact that, it was high school newspaper, but, it is printed work. But, I've also written for fanzines, like let's say Yellow Pills, which is a great power pop fanzine started by Jordan Oakes. But it's very little. I wrote very little for that. I have written for Big Takeover magazine. I've written reviews, and that lasted probably about a year or at least a couple issues. And I've written for, smaller things. Plus, I was a co-editor of a power pop fanzine or a power pop adjacent fanzine called Popsided. And that lasted a couple years and had about 9 issues. It was like every quarter, I believe. And we wrote reviews, did interviews, lots of fun things. If you can track that down, I still think it's just a nice slice of, that part of the pop universe, power pop and stuff in the late 90s. But, I've worked in the music business for many a year. And I'm not referring to retail. I've done that job. But I've worked wholesale for many, many years. And one of my jobs, starting in about 2008 maybe, I would do interviews for my work, for our weekly mailer. Now, I'm not going to tell you the name of my company, but I will tell you that they had a weekly new release magazine that they send to all the stores. And I suggested, hey, why don't I start doing, some interviews in there and some reviews and just talk about some of the stuff. Well, the reviews really didn't happen because, people are going to think that that's, the labels are paying for you to write a good review or whatever. And I didn't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. But the interviews did happen. The very first interview I ever did for this magazine was with Translator. Now, that was an email interview. And, I'm a big Translator fan. And, eventually I did interview the same gentleman, Steve Barton, later on for my Beach Blanket Fort Bingo audio podcast at that time. A great guy, really talented Translator, big band. But I've done a heck of a lot of phone interviews over the years. I think interviews combined, the last year or two maybe have been email interviews, and we haven't done a lot of them lately because the whole interview is really, prepping for the interview, doing the interview, and then spending hours transcribing the interview can be a little time consuming. So, we toned down on that over the last couple of years. But I've done probably over 400 interviews with mostly musicians, but also actors, actresses, directors, really just a great bunch of people. I've had very few bad experiences with any of the people that I talk to. I don't really talk about this that much because I don't want to come off as bragging and stuff, but you don't know how much time you have left on this planet. There's a lot of people out there, even my close YouTube friends and my Facebook friends, that don't really know the amount of stuff I've done if they've only known me maybe the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm going to go through a list here. Now, like I said, it's like 400 people that I've interviewed, at least. I'm going to just give you some of the high points. I'm going to show you a JPEG of the actual interview that got printed in a magazine. These are all print interviews. Some of them did make it online. And I'm going to tell you some of these interviews. They're in no particular order. And if I have like a certain memory to share about that interview, then I will do that. Now, this isn't all the interviews. This is just like the JPEGs that I could find really immediately. But there's a lot of them. So sit back, relax, and let's take a little trip through my secret career as a music journalist. We're going to start with Translator, great San Francisco band, put out some great albums. Steel Panther. And I did this interview under the pseudonym Bo Nur. Yeah. Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers, Ben Folds. I interviewed Lips from Anvil. I interviewed, John Anderson from Yes. Rob Halford, at that point he was in the group Halford, but of course he's the lead singer of Judas Priest. Charlie Pride, the legendary country singer. Nick Lowe, that was a bucket list for me, really fantastic interview. John Sebastian from Love and Spoonful. Jimmy Webb. And I will tell you this, Jimmy Webb accidentally revealed something to me that he didn't want anybody to know about. So he basically told me, he said, please don't print that in the interview. And I'm taking that to the grave. I'm not going to let anybody know what that is. I interviewed Jeff Goldblum, absolutely wonderful guy, just as great as you would possibly imagine. And I had him record a special birthday message for my daughter's birthday at the time. Homer Flynn from The Residents, another bucket list. Residents, I love them. Steve Forbert, the Rubinoos. I've actually interviewed them several times. Vicki Lawrence, she was promoting Mama's Family. And of course, you remember her from Mama's Family and The Carol Burnett Show. Susie Quattro, another bucket list. Status Quo, Francis Rossi, fantastic. Oh my gosh, Neil Innes, as you know, from the Ruddles and from Bonzo Dog Band, really great guy. He actually ended up sending me a CD box set and a signed card, which was really, really wonderful. Ray Thomas, the legendary Ray Thomas from the Moody Blues. I also interviewed Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues. Paul Dean from Loverboy. Kate Pearson from the B-52s. Judy Collins. Johnny Marr from, obviously, the Smiths. We were talking about solo stuff. Fantastic guy. Jackson Brown. Now, I was told by his people that I only had 20 minutes with him. And Jackson, actually, it was the last interview of the day, and he sent his assistant away. He said, no. Let's continue this interview. And we actually ended up talking for about an hour. Absolutely great guy. Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. Slash. Now, I was told by the label, do not bring up Velvet Revolver. Do not bring up Guns N' Roses. He's only promoting Slash's Snake Pit. Of course, he brought up Velvet Revolver and Guns N' Roses through the whole interview, and we barely talked about Slash's Snake Pit. I mean, we did, talk enough, but George Clinton from Funkadelic, that was a fun one. And his handlers, when I met them a few months later, they kept coming up to me and telling me how much they loved my interview with him, even more than the one he did for Rolling Stone, which, I mean, they were probably just being nice. I don't believe it when people say stuff like that. Jeff Bridges, a great guy. He actually got disconnected and called me back. Robin Hitchcock said one of the funniest things I've ever had in an interview. I mean, it'll take a while to tell the story of what led to that, but it was really, really funny. And I remember that all too well. Ice Cube. I remember in Ice Cube, we talked about movies, and I said Jaws was my favorite movie. He said, yeah, mine too. See, we got something in common. And I never thought we didn't. But Linda Ronstadt, fantastic interview. She giggled through the whole thing. I actually ended up emailing her a song that she didn't have, that she sang on, that she didn't even remember recording. And that was, she responded and said that I should have recorded the solo. But that was fantastic. In fact, I did the interview. I can't remember the year, but it was essentially about a week or two after she had been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Devo, I've interviewed Jerry Casale a few times. Pat Denizio from the Smithereens. Colin Hay from Men at Work. Todd Rundgren, and his voice was a lot deeper than I expected, I'll tell you that much. Les Paul, the legendary guitarist Les Paul. Fantastic interview. Actually lasted 90 minutes and just a wonderful gentleman. Sharon Jones, a really, really wonderful interview. She actually ended up singing songs to me on the phone because we were discussing her Christmas album. And she was actually giving me, little renditions of songs that, no one else was listening to except, maybe a handler on her end or something. Martha Davis from the Motels, really wonderful person. Barry Hay from Golden Earring. I talked to Dig Wayne and Chris Bostock from the Joe Boxers, great guys. One of my favorite interviews, Vidal Sassoon, believe it or not. Wonderful gentleman. Just so many great stories. Such a kind person. Andy Summers from The Police. That was great fun. Chris Isaac. Pat Simmons from Doobie Brothers. John Frusciante from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Carol Burnett. And the one that people are really, I think, kind of surprised about is I actually interviewed Jimmy Page. And I was really surprised because I didn't really know what his voice sounded like. And I just remember, on the phone, I just remember hearing this voice going, "Hello, Steve, this is Jimmy." And I was like totally blown away. I go, "Jimmy Page." I'm talking to friggin' Jimmy Page. And every one of these, I was like blown away because these are people that I grew up with or I admired. And I'm talking with them, and the interviews, and we're having a conversation, and that's really what a lot of my interviews are, is conversations with these great artists. Now, on my videos, in the past, I have mentioned about doing interviews, and I've maybe touched on some of these people, and I've interviewed a lot more, but I couldn't find JPEGs on them, unfortunately. But I stopped talking about these interviews because I didn't want people to think like, "Oh, he's so arrogant." So it's not that at all. I mean, I'm in awe. I mean, I'm still pinching myself to go, I did these, I never go back and read my own things, but I just see the picture and I see by Steve Schnee or, whatever, Steve Spaz Schnee. I always have to like, oh yeah, that's right. I did that. It's stuff that I'm very, very, very proud of, but I don't walk around clucking and telling people I interviewed this person, I interviewed that person. That's not the kind of person that I am. But I thought, you know what? I just want to take a moment and share this because I'm very proud of this, and I continue to do these things. The interviews are fewer and far between. Now, a lot of you have seen the interviews that I do on my channel, on my Beach Blanket Fort Bingo show, and I sometimes have my co-host Ronnie Barnett. Those are pretty much how these other interviews went. Now, that's very similar to what these other interviews were, but they were on the phone and recorded, and I had to go and I had to transcribe everything and cut out a bunch of stuff because it was way too much to fit on a page. I mean, here I am talking about this stuff, and I can remember them when I see these interviews. I can remember exactly the moments and the cool things that happened and just how nervous I'd be. But like after the first 30 seconds, it was smooth sailing. But building up to that moment, oh boy, the anxiety was crazy. But I just wanted to share that with you now. On my videos, I've never actually shown any of these JPEGs. I mean, I have all of this stuff, on like PDFs and stuff. When I moved recently, I got rid of all the actual magazines, which is really kind of dumb. But, as they say, you can't take it with you. These interviews are out there on the internet. So if you're ever interested, just Google my name and one of these artists, and hopefully it'll bring it up, and you can go read it for yourself. All of these that I just told you about, they're work related, so it's completely separate from what I do here on my channel. But I put the same heart and soul into everything that I do, whether it's making a silly CD Junkie video or interviewing Jimmy Page or Carol Burnett or somebody. But that's about it. It is a part of my life that I don't talk about. I just don't do interviews and reviews. In fact, since the pandemic started, I've done less reviews and I've focused more on videos. But I think I'm going to sort of turn that around and focus more on writing again and less on videos, or maybe an equal amount. But I love just sharing the passion that music brings me. And I hope that comes through in the way that I write and the way that I present my videos. I'm not ego tripping because the minute these things are printed, I don't want to go back and read them because I'm going to go, oh my gosh, I'm going to find so many mistakes. But that's just the way it is. But I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me, I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.